Well, good morning. My name is Heather Clarke-Peckerman. It's a pleasure to be spending the next 40 minutes with you. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us this morning. Today we're going to be covering the topic 7 steps to becoming emotionally intelligent. This is the very beginning of a seminar series we're going to be running all summer long. Actually, we're going to be running the series looking at each one of the dimensions from now all the way to the end of August. I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. Let me give you a quick little overview of who I am. Like I said before, my name is Heather Clarke-Peckerman. I'm the CLO of Strategy, which is a strategic leadership engagement company. I recently moved to the northern Colorado area about 4 years ago, originally from New Jersey, and I've been involved in the talent management industry for close to 20 years now. What I bring to the table is my experience, my knowledge with working with many different organizations throughout the United States. So with that, let me share with you a high-level overview of what we're going to be covering this morning. We're going to first look at defining what is emotional intelligence. How do we identify the 7 different dimensions? And as we go through this, what I encourage you to do is identify of the 7 dimensions, which one do you think you're really good at right now? What is a strength? But most importantly, what area may be an opportunity to improve on? Then we're going to spend quite a bit of time on looking at how to lead with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the foundation of everything we do here at Strategy. It's the foundation, the beginning point when we're working with a client, either in a talent management training or an executive coaching, because it's such a great model. And personally, it has helped me time and time again, not only in my professional arena, but also in my personal life as well. And then at the very end, we're going to answer questions. You will notice to the right-hand side of the screen, there's a little area that if you want to type out a question to me, feel free to do so. And at the very end, I will answer the questions. We are scheduled for 40 minutes. The presentation will be at 30 minutes, give or take a minute or two, with the option for the last 10 minutes to cover questions. If you have to drop off after 30 minutes, feel free to do so, and we will be sending you the link to this webinar afterwards. Okay, so with that, let's just jump right into what is emotional intelligence. If you look at this graphic, emotional intelligence is really the balance between your head and your heart. In our culture in the US, we tend to put so much focus on the brain, right? We make many decisions and we're always focused on what the bottom line is. We look at how to improve efficiencies and productivity. The heart aspect is really concerned with looking at how do we engage our employees? How do we motivate them? How do we create an environment where people want to be? You've probably heard about those topics, engagement, motivation, over the last several years because they've become very critical to an organization's success. So emotional intelligence, the way that I describe it, it gives you the ability to perceive and to express and to understand other people's emotions, perceptions, so that you can manage your own emotions and be effective in any given situation. What it does for me is it gives me a blueprint on how to handle situations, especially heightened situations. So the personal benefits is that you'll wind up having less stress because you'll know how not to get engaged, meaning learning how to pick and choose and how you're going to respond. You'll learn how to enjoy better relationships, not only with your team, but also on the home front. It also helps increase not only the manager's emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence quotient for the entire organization. And it makes it a place that people want to be. I want to share with you a little bit more around the trends of EI. It's been popular for probably about the last 20 years. Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, and it went viral. It became a very, very famous book, and it's still one of the #1 social science books that is in print today. So what we know about emotional intelligence is that it increases with age. If you think back to when you were a teenager and you think about where you are right now, wisdom as well as experience, emotional intelligence, increases because we learn from life what works and what doesn't work and how to handle things differently. Executives also tend to be higher in EI because they have to. They're in a position where they have to move the organization forward. They have to rally the troops. They have to create passion and motivation, inspire people, which is all the heart, the right side of the brain. But they also have to be concerned with the bottom line, the budget, meeting the goals, the quarterly goals. Also, if it's a public company, interacting and interfacing with the shareholders. So it's a real blend between the heart and the head that they have to exemplify to be a really good leader. We also know that women tend to be more emotionally intelligent than men. Now, this is not because women are better than men, not at all. Men and women both bring such value to the workplace. The reason why women are more emotionally intelligent is because we're just wired that way. We're wired very differently. That's a surprise, right? We're wired differently, but we also have been conditioned throughout our culture to be more expressive. Let me give you an example of that. Think about a boy and a girl. They're both 5 years old, and they're skipping down the sidewalk, and the little boy falls and skins his knee, and it's bleeding. Now, if there are any adults around, male or female, then what do you think the number one reaction is of adults when they see a little boy fall? Well, typically what we see is that they'll say, "Oh, get up, you're okay, brush it off, you're a tough guy," right? They are conditioned to not express their emotion. Take the same scenario, a little girl, a little 5-year-old, skipping down the sidewalk. She trips, she falls, she skins her knee, she starts to bleed. There's adults around. What's the most important thing that they wind up doing? They run over to her, they cuddle her, they embrace her, they hug her, they pat her back. They may even kiss the boo-boo, right? And it's like, "Oh, it's okay. Tell me how you feel," right? They encourage more expression. And then what happens is men grow up, girls grow up, right? And then we wind up working together, and we want men to be more expressive, but they don't know how, right? Well, the one thing about emotional intelligence is you can learn how to be more expressive and have that balance. So here's a fun little graphic that kind of summarizes what I just shared with you. All right. This is not to poke fun at men or poke fun at women. It just is a great analogy of how complex women think, right? There's all these different things that are going on at one time and expressing, where men tend to see things in black and white. Not all the time, but this is generalization. But through coaching and training, men become very good at emotional intelligence. So what I want to do is I want to jump right into understanding what emotional intelligence is from our perception, the way strategy teaches it. This graphic is a great summation of everything we're going to talk about today. We are going to address what the 7 different dimensions are, but before we do that, we have to understand what this iceberg is all about. What we look at when we're communicating, right? Whether we're in business meeting or we're at home, there's always the 80-20. We see 20% of somebody's results, 20% of somebody's behavior, right? So let me demonstrate that here for you. Okay, we're talking about this piece right here. Right here. Okay, this is the 20% that we see. And this down here, what we call below the water, below the surface, this is 80%. Now, the 20% on top of the water are things that we notice about others. It could be we notice their dress, and we'll make an assumption about that. We'll notice their attitude, and then we'll also make an assumption or a judgment about that. We will notice their body language, and unconsciously, we will make an assumption about what their body is signaling to us, their body language. And then we also can see somebody's results. If we're managing them, we get to evaluate how good or poor they're doing in terms of their performance. There's a scale. But what we don't know is what is underneath the surface. Okay, this is 80% of what goes on. The only way we understand what's going on below the surface is when we start to get curious, when we seek first to understand than to be understood. So things that would be below the surface that we may not know about somebody would be, what are their values? What are their beliefs? Where were they raised? What country were they raised in? Who raised them? What their religious upbringing or lack of religious upbringing may be. Also looking at what is their motivation. And what I always like to focus on is, what is their pain point? What is, is there something that has happened to them that has caused them to see the world the way they do? And so the interesting thing about this perception iceberg is that when we judge or view the world through our own telescope, right, we're viewing it based on our own values, beliefs, judgments, and assumptions, right? And so in order to really understand where somebody else is coming, we have to do the dive. We have to get curious and start to ask, what else could it be? I see this result, but let me be curious and ask questions to seek understanding. Remember, seek first to understand, then to be understood. You can always come back to a judgment, but if you lead with a judgment, you are going to cut off open communication. So let's take a look at a very quick little video that I want to show you. It's a 30-second video to demonstrate how not to react in a work situation. An example of when somebody's emotions got the best of them, something we call emotional hijacking. Well, I'm sure that woke you up. So let me take you through the diagram to really explain what was going on with this angry employee, right? So this graph that you see in front of you is how emotional intelligence plays out in the real world. It is also a fantastic tool to always keep in the back of your mind so that you can manage your emotions rather than your emotions managing you, right? This gives you the control, right? The way to respond that's going to get you what you want. So when we look at this model, let's just take what happened on the video that we just saw. Okay, so we start over here. Here's the situation, right? There was an employee, a gentleman sitting at his computer, and he was working, right? Then he starts to get frustrated. So the thought was, maybe he was working and the computer froze up. Let's just assume that that's what it is. And he's thinking, wow, this is a piece of junk. This always happens. Then the feeling that would have triggered a negative emotion, the anger, the frustration, right? So the thought was, this is a piece of junk, or this always happens. I can never get my work done. And it immediately, once you have that thought, it will immediately trigger an emotion. And so if you want to learn to master emotional intelligence, it starts with mastering your triggers. Well, how do you master your triggers? Well, you first need to know what they are. So my takeaway assignment for you as a coach, I always give assignments, right? Or you can call it an accountability. It's identify what are your top 3 values. At this point in time, what are they? Because I can guarantee you, if you're not clear on what your top 3 values are, when those values get compromised, you will get into what we call an emotional state. And sometimes we're really good at walking ourselves out of it, and other times we're not, where the emotion is so strong, it takes over that we literally, right, the emotion's strong that we literally cannot think. Have you ever heard of that phrase, hindsight is 20/20? Oh my goodness, I wish I didn't respond that way. Well, if you've ever experienced that, like I have, right, we're all human, it's because we were not managing our emotions were managing us. So this gentleman thinks this computer is a piece of junk. He gets frustrated. The more he gets frustrated, did you notice how it escalated? Then it went from frustration to anger. And that is a very different energy that you're dealing with when it's anger versus frustration. Well, then once he got angry, right, he went over to here. This behave and react, the way he responded. He first took the keyboard and he smacked the computer. Then he hit it again, knocked the computer off the table, off the desk, onto the floor, and then kicked the computer, the monitor, right? Now, the outcome is interesting because this was just a video clip I found on YouTube. I don't know this individual personally or the company that he was working for, but I can only imagine, so can you, that if this were to happen today in most organizations, this person probably would have been fired, if not put on a performance improvement plan. So with emotional intelligence, you say, okay, so the outcome, is that what this person wanted? Do you think that man woke up that morning and said, I want to get fired. I want to get so frustrated that I take my computer and I destroy it? No. So then we say, well, then what happened? Because I come from a place that I believe most people have positive intentions. They want to go to work. They want to show up and do a good job. But what happens in between that intention and the reality? Well, a lot of dynamics go on. What my goal for you today is to learn how you can use this very simple diagram that is right in front of you right now so that you will always get what you want, right? And how you always get what you want, very first thing, as I shared with you already, know your triggers so that you can manage them. And then before you go into any client meeting, any team meeting, any one-on-one with your own boss, or even on the home front, right? Anytime before you're going to have a discussion, be very, very clear. What do I want my outcome to be? What is it that I want? And in order for me to get that, now let's go back over here. There's two things that we can do. One, if you really want to master emotional intelligence, you go in, you focus on what the outcome is, and then you say, in order for me to master that, how do I have to think about this situation? If that's too much of a leap to go from here to here, then let's back it up one, okay? In order for me to have a really great relationship with my coworkers, I'm not going to respond in a negative way when they hit my triggers. And so in order for them not to hit my triggers, I need to think differently about it, okay? So let me give you a very quick example of how this model has saved me professionally. It was about 7 years ago, and I was working with a community college, and I would align with them, and I'd go into these client meetings where we were doing a needs analysis to find out what type of training they wanted. They would get grants from the state of New Jersey, and then I would be one of the trainers that would go and deliver this training. And I'm just going to make this name up. So I was working with Richard, and Richard took me into a tech company, and we were sitting in a conference room. It was a long square table, and across from me was the VP of HR. And she was sharing with me that she wanted training, very interactive, which is my style, and there were going to be 10 people. And I thought, wow, this is great. Well, then she says, oh, and you see that monitor right behind your head? And I turned and I looked, and she goes, for 4 hours, we're going to be conferencing in 40 other employees. And I thought, wow. Well, my first question is, well, what kind of outcome do you want with his training? Because from my experience, that's not going to be a very good training for the 40 people that are sitting behind me. Is it that you just need to check off that they've done it? Well, then let's create a webinar program for them versus having them sit there for 4 hours. So I'm making the suggestion of having one training live with the 10 people in front of me and then doing a webinar for the other 40. Well, before I could finish, this woman who was sitting directly across this conference table from me, she had a pile of books to the right-hand side, and she took those books and she flung them right across the table, and they came flying at me, and I quickly moved, and they went on the floor. Okay, heightened situation. She hit on one of my number one trigger, which is respect. I'm all about respect, whether it's for me or somebody else. And when someone's being disrespectful, right, I know that that is my trigger, and I need to manage it. Okay, it's not about her. It's about the way I'm assigning meaning to what she did. So my goal before I went in there was I wanted to have a good meeting. I wanted to be able to identify needs, and I wanted to be able to walk out where Richard and I had a plan of action of what we were going to do over the next couple of months to deliver training. So here we go. Situation, she pushed the books and they went flying right across me. My immediate thought was, oh my goodness, I cannot believe she is a VP of HR. My emotion was, I felt extremely disrespected and I felt appalled, to be honest. However, what I wanted to do and what I did were very different. What I wanted to do, my reaction is I wanted to get up, wanted to look at her and said, thank you for your time. Good luck with getting a different trainer. I will not accept this. And I wanted to walk out. Well, the outcome would have been I would have left my colleagues sitting there and I would not have been able to demonstrate how to deal with a difficult situation, which is one of the topics that they wanted me to teach on. So it was a great learning opportunity. So instead of getting up and leaving, what I did was I just paused. We call it the pregnant pause in emotional intelligence. Kind of just breathe, go to the left side of the brain, which is all about the thinking, because I was in the emotion. And I said, what else can it be, right? Obviously, she is passionate about training, or else she wouldn't have flung the books, because that's passion. I don't like the way she demonstrated that passion, but it's still passion. And that's where the two of us could intersect. So what I said was, back to her, I said, obviously, you're very passionate about training, and so am I. You have experience, and so do I. Together, I'm confident we can create a program that not only will be engaging, motivating, but transforming, but will also meet your budgetary restraints. Bingo. Changed the entire dynamic of that meeting. She stopped, she took a deep breath, and then she apologized. And I said, that's fine. Let's start all over. But from me to you, the only way I was able to get out of that interaction successfully was by knowing this. Okay. So let me share with you what the 7 dimensions are of emotional intelligence. The very first one is, how aware are you of your own emotions? Number 1, if you're not sure, if you never even think about it, I'd encourage you to, every meeting you go in, just take a pulse. Like, how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling in this meeting? Most of us don't think about it, and we're just on autopilot, and then life winds up happening to us, right, rather than for us, because we are letting it control us rather than we be in control of how we want each situation to be. The second one is looking at how aware are we of other people's emotions. And this is where we start to look at body language, we look at tone of voice, we look at their overall communication dynamics. And so next month in May, our webinar is going to be on looking at dimensions 1 and 2, understanding ourselves as well as understanding others. And then we get to the third one, which is how do we make our decisions? And there's a 6-step process that we use when we're coaching on how to help someone make a multidimensional approach, a decision to make sure everybody is brought on, right? We're rallying the troops, bringing people along with us rather than leaving people behind. Then the fourth and the fifth dimension are looking at how do we manage our emotions of ourselves as well as others. And this is a very proactive. So if you want to think about manage emotions, it's like a barometer. Right now in April, we're at the very end of April here in northern Colorado, and typically the average temperature in April is probably around 60 degrees, right? However, what happens when it gets to 80 degrees, right? That would be atypical. So when you think about managing, it's somebody's temperament. On average, this is how Heather shows up. This is who she is. That's how somebody would describe me. Now, 6 and 7 are around controlling our emotions and controlling others' emotions. And it's reactive. And this is really the dynamic, the gift that emotional intelligence brings in. Because when everything's going right, it's pretty easy to respond. But how do we respond and keep showing up as the professional, as the person that we want to be known for in difficult times? Well, it's being very clear on one of who you are and what your values are, and most importantly, what do you want as the outcome of that interaction, of that meeting. So controlling Ours and others' emotions are really looking at when that temperature, if we go back to the temperature gauge, if the average temperature in April is 60 and one day it gets to 80, right? Well, right? It's heightened, right? So it's going to require more attention. So in May, we're going to look at dimension 1 and 2. In June, we're going to be focusing on making decisions. In July, we're going to be focusing our webinar on managing emotions of ourselves and others. And then in August, we're going to be looking at controlling our emotions of ourselves as well as others. And that will be our summer webinar series that I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about EI, to join us. Okay, so a quote that I live by, and I'm going to share it with you, and I've also shared it twice throughout this webinar, is first seek to understand, then to be understood. This is when we go back to that iceberg analogy, right? We only see literally a tip of the iceberg of someone's reaction. We see the reaction of how they're responding, but we don't understand what's going on. What is causing them to feel this way? And if you want to make a huge breakthrough in any relationship, in any conversation, do what we call take the dive. Ask two questions. One is it their intent to make me feel this way? Right? When emotions are high and you can feel that negativity inside you, and you're like, wow, they just hit one of my triggers. Ask yourself, is it their intent to make me feel this way? Because it's going to get you from the right side of the brain, which is all emotion, and now it's going to get you thinking, which is the left side of the brain. 9 times out of 10, I can guarantee you, it is not their intent to make you feel that way. You're equating a meaning to their behavior, right? Which is causing that emotion. So then the second question we ask is, if it's not their intent, then what else can it be? Take the dive, start to ask questions, open-ended. Help me to understand how you arrived at the decisions. What factors did you bring into your conclusion? I see that you're upset, but I don't know why. What's going on, right? Open-ended, no judgment, right? So with that, I want to just summarize our session here this morning by sharing with you 3 things. 1, their perception is your reality. So make sure that you are leaving the impression that you want to be leaving, meaning your body language, your tone of voice, your communication skills, what you do, what you don't do is signaling to others what they think about you, right? That's their tip of the iceberg. That's what they see. Just make sure it's in line. Are you getting feedback that is consistent with who you believe you are? If it's not, that's where you make a little bit of a change. Second thing is, anytime you're in doubt or you're starting to feel, you feel that your trigger might be getting ignited, ask, well, what else can it be? If you're stuck in the left-hand side of the brain and you can't get to an emotion, then flip the question and say, what's right about this situation? And it will diffuse a lot of judgment so you can start to see clearly or more clearly what's going on from other people's perspective, not only yours, and then you focus on the outcome. Well, if this is what I really want, how do I need to respond to this? How can I change the way I think about this to give me a different result? And that's change. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's well worth it. And then finally, act in a way that's going to get you what you want, that focusing on the end goal. So with that, that brings us right to the 30 minutes as promised. For the next few minutes, what we're going to be doing is answering questions. If you liked our presentation this morning, you can find us on Facebook. We send out daily motivation, so you can sign up for that. You can connect with me individually on LinkedIn or the company strategy LinkedIn page. You can also reach out to us on our on our website, and we have a quarterly newsletter that goes up that you could sign up for, and our weekly vlogs go out on Friday. So with that, I so much appreciate your time. Thank you for being here with us this morning. What I'm going to do now, if you have to drop off, you can do so. Like I said, I'm recording this and I'll be sending you the link. And let me just go in to see what questions have been asked. Okay, great. All right, so the first one is, are you born with a certain level of EI? So let me share with you the way I'm reading this question. I'm reading this question as if you were born with an EI quotient and it can never change. So I'm going to respond to the question based on the way I'm assuming that. Our EI increases as we get older, as I shared with you in that one graphic. From the time you're a child to the time you're an adult, you're much more emotionally intelligent. Some of us more so than others. But through practice, you absolutely can change your EI quotient, that it can go up significantly. What we do is we do an assessment. We do a baseline at the beginning of any initiative to find out where are you already strong, and most importantly, what are your learning opportunities? And then for the next 6 months, we focus on those learning opportunities and then do a post-assessment so we can measure the effectiveness of your success. And then it's just practice, practice, practice. I teach this. I love this. It's the foundation of everything I do. But let me tell you, I continually have to think about this because it's one of those areas in your life, if you're not putting time and attention and a focus on it, you can easily revert back to a bad or ineffective behavior. And then that's just information, right? You're like, oops, didn't handle that well. All right, what would I do next time? And then you just get right back into it. So thank you for that question. Second question is, what does the EI assessment measure? Okay, as I shared with you earlier, it measures 7 different dimensions that really give you insight to how aware are you of your own emotions in different situations. The first 2 dimensions are really looking at how aware are you of your own body language, your communication dynamics, and also being aware of other people's body language and dynamics. The third one is looking at decision making. And the 4th and the 5th is how do we manage our emotions as well as others. And then the 6th and the 7th dimension are controlling our emotions in heightened situations and also controlling emotions of others. That's really critical, that last one, number 7, for those of you that are managers, because if you haven't already, you will have employees come up to you that are frustrated, that feel that they can't get their work done, and they're going to be looking to you to help them solve it. And that's where number 7 comes in to be very, very helpful. Okay, and then finally, the last question that we have today is, what is the first step in developing EI? The very first step, the way that I teach this, is that you need to know and own and manage your own emotional triggers. And that starts by looking at what are my top 3 values today. Values are changing. What your values were when you were a teenager versus your early 20s, your 30s, your 40s. As life changes, so does the priority of your values. So at this point in time, this snapshot, what are your top 3 values? Know them, own them, manage them. Because when you're in a meeting, and like I shared with you earlier, my number 1 is respect. If I feel somebody else is being disrespectful, even not to me, but I see that they're being disrespectful to somebody else, that is like a little red flag that goes off in my head. Just like when you get an email that's urgent and there's a little red flag, it goes like bing, and I'm like, okay, this is mine. This is my trigger, and I need to manage it because number 1 for me is respect, and even respecting others when they're being disrespectful, right? So I want to maintain the self-esteem and self-respect of others even when they're not being respectful, because to me that says more about who I am and what I value. Because if I come back really strong at somebody, then what am I doing? I'm doing the exact same thing they're doing. Now I'm being disrespectful to them in a public format, and that's not what I want to do. So it's learning how to be able to phrase things and bring a team back together in a way that empowers the team rather than disengages them. Okay, so with that, I want to thank you again for your time. Thank you for being here with us. If you felt that this was helpful and you'd like to learn more, you can reach out to us at info@strategy.com, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you or your company about how we can assist you in any of your training or coaching needs. Thank you so much, and I hope that you will be with us again next month. Have a great afternoon.